Hello, my lovely rose garden, and welcome to the Litha reading wrap-up for 2022. Litha, also called Midsummer, is a celebration of the sun and the summer season. It is a time to bask in the warmth and bounty of summer that are provided by the sun. During Litha, it is also said to be easier to commune with the Fae. Litha occurs on the summer solstice, usually between June 20th and June 22nd. Which is when you would celebrate it if you are of the inclination to do so. And this reading wrap-up is a little bit different because it is one of my first ever attempts at a reading challenge. And that reading challenge was to finish the entire Shadow War Saga by Elana Mugdan, starting with Dragon Speaker, then through Dragon Child, Dragon Blood, Dragon War, and ending with Dragon Empress, the series finale which came out this May. And how did I do on that challenge? Well, you're about to find out. To make things a little more fun, I'm actually going to be recording my reviews for each individual book as I finish reading them. And to make things even more fun, I've only read from Dragon Speaker through Dragon Blood, and I finished that a couple years ago, so I'm a little rusty on this series. I will be rereading the first 3 books and then reading for the first time the 4th and the final installments. So let's buckle in and get ready for that. Please do be mindful of spoilers, as I will be talking about the entire series, and even within those first couple of books, I'm probably going to talk about spoilers for those books, as well as how they end up relating to future books, given that I am rereading the first 3, and I already know that there's some setup in the first and second books for the 3rd book, so just beware of spoilers like it says in the disclaimer. Thank you for being here. Please do check out Elana Mugdan's Ko-fi. I'm going to link it down in the description. Ko-fi is kind of like Patreon, but for people who don't necessarily want to commit to a monthly donation. And you can also purchase the entire series from Ko-fi, and that gives a lot more revenue to the author, so I highly recommend using that platform if you decide you want to read this series for yourself, which I'm pretty certain I'm going to highly recommend. Thank you very much, and let's get started with Dragon Speaker. Dragon Speaker by Elana Mugdan. Published 2016. Fantasy, 359 pages. A young woman's life is forever changed when she accepts a quest from a goddess to protect the last dragon on the planet. So let me just say right now that I consider Dragon Speaker to be essential fantasy YA. SJM, who I don't even know anyone else, like their names are gone, all right? No one else in fantasy YA matters. Dragon Speaker is all there is. Pick it up, read it, love it, tell me about it. It's great. I fucking love this book. 100% recommend it. And yeah, review over. No, never mind. So let me start. Gosh, where do I even begin with this one? Let me start by first going over my experience with the original time that I read it. I think I rated it like 3.5 or 4 stars, and now when I think back on that, that's underrating this book, probably because I was still in my little edgy YA fantasy phase, which was dumb. But this book, so good. Well, okay, maybe I've seen what goes around on TikTok, so maybe just for TradPub to that attitude, but this is indie. And I fucking love me some indie, and this was one of the first indie books that I actually read. I got it because I actually won it in a contest on Twitter, and I have a very special little note from the author on the first page, which is why I will never get rid of this one, even though it is technically outdated. Elana did re-release the series in 2020 because some of the original text wasn't the way she wanted it to be. I believe that this book was originally published in the UK by a publishing house, and they had some cuts made to limit down the page amount, which does happen sometimes when you're working with certain presses. They want to keep the books a little bit smaller, either for marketing to readers or because they just don't want to put that much... Well, I could go on a whole thing, but page count increases the cost of a book, basically, is what you need to know. It costs more money to print a book with more pages. So sometimes presses will ask that you trim down your pages a little bit. So the 2020 re-release of this book actually has more content, more context, and I would love to read it, but I am never going to get rid of the one that I currently have. So when I'm saying that I 1000% recommend, consider it essential reading, love this book to bits, I'm talking about a version that, by the author's own definition, is not quite complete. It doesn't have everything that she originally wanted in there. So keep that in mind, that I am reviewing an inferior copy and still saying that it is fucking awesome. So definitely go get it. Now, about the story itself. So, first and foremost, within the first few chapters, the main character fucking dies, which is a choice that definitely stands out. So, okay, backing up. Back up. I'm getting way over my head already. Carria, nameless, is this weird orphan girl who has no magic. Everyone on this world has magic, except for her. Like, some of them have very weak magic, and they're kind of, picked on, made fun of. Everyone is supposed to have magic. She doesn't. And in this world's lore, not having magic basically means you're not alive. You don't have a soul, basically. Which is, some foreshadowing that I'm sure we'll touch on later when I actually get to the part of the series that talks about that. I'm going to try to keep to just what's in Dragon Speaker, since I'm rereading the rest of it later anyway. And yeah, that causes some problems for her, and she ends up dying and meets the goddess Shivneth, who is a dragon and kicks ass and is really... Okay, we'll talk about Shivneth in a bit, but Shivneth basically brings her back to life by wielding some of her own magic into Carria, but with the mission that she needs to find and protect the last dragon that is on this planet, which name escapes me at the moment because there's a lot of places to keep track of, and there's a lot of really gorgeous maps to help you keep track of them. I'm messing up because I want to say Sentir, but that's a city, not the world itself, and Elentria is the country, not the world itself, so, I'm just going to call it the world, and that's just going to have to be good enough. But anyway, so there's a dragon that is broken free of this veil. Long time ago, there was a super evil dude. He was locked away into, this ether realm, but to balance out the force of his evilness being gone, an equal amount of good also had to leave, so all the dragons are gone now. But one of them has broken through, a young dragon named Thorian, and it is Carria's mission to protect that dragon. That is her only job from Shivneth, is to make sure that that dragon's okay. And Thorian is my favorite character in this series. He might be one of my favorite characters of all time. I fucking love Thorian. I would die for Thorian. I named my Dragonite in Pokemon Go after him. I love Thorian and love the way that his relationship with Carria is portrayed. And since I'm just kind of rambling, I might as well just talk about that now. This is probably the best quote-unquote Dragon Rider series that exists. And I say that because one of my big issues with Dragon Rider series is that usually either the dragon is just a steed, or you don't understand why the dragon's not taking more agency in the plot, because if it's basically as smart as the humans, then why isn't it being treated as such by the story, and on and on. And I think one of the only other series that I found really satisfactory to that end was Temeraire, which I just didn't continue because it was a little bit much for me. So Thorian and Carria are connected to each other. They are bound to each other. And it's a magic thing. And Carria is able to speak to Thorian. She is basically the only person on the planet who can speak to Thorian because of the magic that Shivneth gave her. And the interesting thing about dragons in this world is that on their own, they don't have emotion. They are purely logical, purely just running on the logos to achieve whatever ends that they have, which explains a lot about Shivnith and some of her actions throughout the series, especially in this book. So, when Thorian and Caria first meet, Thorian is very cold and distant and not really considerate of others. Like, he's borderline, like, debating the merits of eating her. But the more they bond, the more he begins to experience emotions for the first time, and she's kind of guiding him through what these emotions mean and what they are, and that's not always a positive thing. As one of the other characters, Maxton, points out, I don't remember the exact quote, I don't have it in front of me, but he says something to the effect of, if you teach him anger, he will feel anger. If you teach him joy, he will feel joy. So, because of their bond, Thorian is feeling Caria's emotions, which means that she really needs to buckle down and have control of herself, because if she loses control of her emotions, she gets too angry or too sad. That is experienced by Thorian, who is young, not super in control of his own magical powers, and he's feeling these things for the first time through her, so they are way more powerful feelings to him because it's the first time he's ever felt it. So her being mildly irritated is like unbearable frustration for him because he doesn't know what mild irritation is. It's the first time he's experiencing any form of irritation at all. So it's really good. Like the back and forth that they have, the kind of connection they develop is so good. He is such a character in his own right, and Caria never forgets that. Caria never treats him like he's an animal or a pet. She is there to protect him. And she, at first, is really caught up in, like, this idea of being a great hero. That's kind of what Shivnith promises to her, is that, you know, she'll be this great hero of legend, and people will finally stop looking down on her, and she'll be someone important, and she goes into the story with that in mind, with that goal of being beloved by the people, which when I first read this book, I thought was super annoying, and I'm like, oh, she just wants to be special, blah, 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 blah. No, it's actually super relatable. Like, rereading it now with a little more maturity of my own, some of her choices, yes, they are a little bit immature, but that's because she's a teenager. And she's a realistically written teenager. Does she have shortcomings? Yes, she does. Is she regularly called out on them? Yes, she is. So there's no problem here. It's not like the world is bending over to excuse her actions. If anything, she is held to an impossible standard just based on what she's expected to do here, and reacts to it in realistic ways, in realistic frustration and hopelessness, and I'm just a person who's never wielded magic before. I have no idea how to do this, and I'm not sure I even can do this. So I actually found her very relatable. And yeah, Thorian really brings that out. Like, things really get going once Thorian comes into the story. You get a little bit of world building and character building before that point to get, you know, sort of ease you in. And then once Thorian shows up, and there's a lot of different political factions getting involved, and it's really good. It can be a lot to keep track of. I would definitely recommend keeping notes. I have my reading journal that I can keep notes in, and I will probably be using it a lot more as the series continues, because if I recall, you start getting other countries and other civilizations and people from those who have their own part to play, because as I said, Thorian is the only dragon. Everyone wants him, and that makes for some really interesting conflict, because again, Caria's job here, supposedly, from Shivnith, is to defeat Necrovar, who's like the super evil dude from way back when, who, since Thorian's back, some part of him's gotta be back. So, everyone is saying only a dragon can defeat him, so Caria's like, well, shit. Because her job is to defeat Necrovar in Thorian's place. Thorian is not supposed to be part of this conflict. That was Shivnith's whole thing, is that Thorian is meant to be kept safe, which means Caria's gotta go fight. And everyone's like, well, that's not gonna work out. It's impossible. There's no way you could ever do this. It has to be Thorian. which means that you get characters like Eldelphia, who I stan. Eldelphia is the Empress of Elentria, and she is probably one of the best gray antagonists because her whole thing is that she is concerned for the safety of her people. She wants to make sure that what happened 10 ages ago when Necrovar was running rampant across the world never happens again. She is lawful good. However, that means that she wants Thorian to be used as a weapon against Necrovar for her people. She wants to have him basically be their attack dog to make sure that these dark forces and necromagic don't become a problem again. Well, that's not what Caria or Thorian want, so of course there's some conflict there, and that gets really interesting. Pretty much I love all the characters. Fletcher is baby boy Bean, love him, stan him, protect him. And Roxanne, who on my initial read I thought was just, kind of a bitch. Like, honestly, I was like, oh, she's like the mean girl of the village. Like, I don't know where I pulled that from, because rereading this, no, she's not. Roxanne is an abused girl who finally gets a taste of freedom, wants to make her own way in the world, and can't because she's wrapped up in all this stuff with Caria by virtue of having run away with her, which wasn't even necessarily her choice to do. She just kind of was there at the wrong time in the wrong place and is just kind of roped into all of this. Like, this wasn't ever something she chose. This isn't a part of what she imagined for herself, but she's here, and she might be snarky and snappy and make some sarcastic remarks, but she's still one of the best assets to the team. So, you know what? Roxanne rocks. She rules. I love her. She's great. Even Maxton is pretty lukewarm in this one. He's a politician. He's Caria's love interest. Maybe, sorta. We're not entirely sure, but she gets blushy around him, which personally I think is just because he's one of the only people around her age who seems to be giving her some positive attention and is like, oh yeah, you're amazing. I think you're going to do wonderful things. Like, yeah, of course she's going to get blushy. We'll see how that goes, because they are not my end goal ship, but I haven't finished the series, so I don't know if they're going to be a thing. This will be fun. Watch the shipping throughout the series. Watch how I comment on the ships, because you guys are going to be hearing all this in real time. I'm going to be, wrapping this up in a second, and then it's going to go straight into Dragon Child, straight into Dragon Blood. But for me, this is like weeks between books. So my opinion of a character could be totally different in 2 minutes for you. And I don't know that yet. So enjoy, have fun. I hope we have some good moments like that. And I'm going to cap it off by saying that there is one character that I do still fucking hate. I cannot stand, and it is Sabaris, Water Princess. Fuck this bitch, okay? She is awful. She is actually the mean girl. She is what I thought Roxanne was on my first read through. Like, she's the romantic rival, I guess. She's in love with Maxton. I don't know if they're like, it probably does say somewhere if she's like formally engaged to Maxton or something. I feel like she was, or she certainly feels that way. And she's like, oh my god, this peasant girl, who does she think she is? She's holding hands with him and talking with him, and I'm like, bitch, there was just an attack on your city. Shut the fuck up. So, yeah, hate her. We'll see how I feel in a couple minutes for you and a couple days for me, I guess. But right now, fuck Seba, Water Princess, fuck her, I hate her. 0 out of 10 stars for her. But for everyone else and the plot and the world building and everything else, amazing, 10 out of 10, we stan. I'm gonna go with... it's hard to choose between 4.5 or 5 stars, because I get the feeling that I'm gonna want to be able to go up from here, but I don't... You know what? Fuck it. 5 stars. All right, 5 roses. Sorry, I rate in roses because I'm on brand. 5 roses for Dragon Speaker. Pick it up, read it. Links down in the description where you can go get it. Do that. Pause the video, go get it. Just go right now. We'll wait. Did you get it? Okay, awesome. Comment to me about what you think of it, and I guess we're gonna roll right into Dragon Child. See you in a bit. Dragon Child by Elana Mugdan. Published 2019. Fantasy, 550 pages. Caria, Fletcher, Roxanne, and their new friends in Elentria race against time to save Thorian from the effects of Darksalm. Or, in simpler terms, great googly moogly, it's all gone to shit! Oh my god, I forgot how much this book fucking hurts. Okay, context. Context required. So I don't believe I mentioned Darksalm in my last review. I don't know, because it's been a bit since I recorded it. But there's this thing called Darksalm in this universe that's made out of dragon blood, which, according to this book, is apparently a very volatile substance. But anyway, basically Darksalm is a combination of dragon blood and necromagic, and if you get touched by it, it basically rots your soul, and then you are one of Nekrovar's minions. And in the first book, while Thorian was protecting Caria, he got hit with a little bit of it during a pretty major attack, and yeah, like that kind of went unexamined in the first book. I think a lot of people were really hoping, Caria definitely was really hoping that like it was either not enough to affect him or that maybe it missed. But no, it definitely hit, and in Dragon Child it is taking hold. And the primary conflict of this book is having to do with the fact that Thorian is slowly losing control of himself, losing control of his magic, and Nekrovar being able to have a dragon on his side would effectively just end the war right there. Like, Nekrovar wins if that happens. Especially because Thorian is the only dragon currently in Solaris. And Solaris is the name of the planet. I figured it out right after I recorded for Dragon Speaker. I was like, right, Solaris. That's the name of this world. So yeah, a lot of bad shit is gonna happen. And the other part of the conflict is that Tanthflame, who is fucking great as a villain. He was pretty good in Dragon Speaker, but I think he really shines as a, I guess, ironically, if you're familiar with tropes, you would call him the dragon to Nekrovar's big bad. Tanthflame is basically, while Nekrovar is still somewhat sealed away in the ether world, Tanthflame is his main, like, guy who's acting on his behalf. He's like the Saruman to Sauron, if you catch, my reference there. And he's really brutal and ruthless and nasty, but not in a straightforward way, in more of a, I'm going to turn everyone against you, and they're going to believe me because I have better publicity than you, I have higher standing than you. He was, like, exposed for his treachery in the last book, but he's managed to twist that around and make it seem like Caria and Roxanne and Fletcher are the ones who are lying, and Thorian is a dangerous creature with uncontrollable magic who's, like, going into these rages and attacking towns, and, which is kind of happening because Thorian is losing control of his magic, but, conveniently leave out that it's Nekrovar's fault, and also Tanthflame's fault for creating the Darksalm in the first place in the last book. Yeah, it's a lot. So things go in a very quick 180 from where we ended, with Dragon Speaker ending on a positive note, seeming like Caria had fulfilled her mission and defeated Nekrovar. Turns out, nope, she didn't. In fact, Nekrovar is barely fazed by what she did in the first book. She used that bolt of magic that Shivnath gave her that she no longer has access to, like, aside from being able to talk to Thorian, obviously, and that continues to be a debate throughout this book of whether or not Caria does have magic, because she's alive and she has a soul, and according to the lore of this world, that means you have magic. Like, magic is part of your soul. You can't be alive without it. It's literally life magic. But Karya is still convinced that she doesn't have any magic, that the only magic she does have comes from Shivneth, and that she's effectively useless in any kind of magic conflict, which she hates admitting, but will admit. So the conflict goes really hard. Like, we go from being on top of the world and heroes and celebrated and everything that Karya wanted to almost immediately being on the run, treated as war criminals, and Thorian is dying. Worse than dying, he is losing his soul to Nekrovar and is going to be nothing but a mindless puppet of the evil force of this world if they don't figure out a way to reverse this. And spoiler alert, there is no reversing it. It's permanent. Nothing any healer they go to can do will help it. They can help heal his physical body. They can make this take a little longer to kill him, buy him a little bit of time, but there's nothing they can do to get that darkness out of his soul. Like, he's tainted, it's gonna grow, nothing they can do can help. And yeah, that's pretty heavy, especially because Thorian is my favorite character. Hey, by the way, Elana, if you're listening, fuck you. I know I sent you a Twitter message, but fuck you again. So Elana has stated that she did write this part of the series from a place of very real pain, of experiencing this kind of loss, and it very much does translate. The scene where Thorian dies is gut-wrenching. It is awful. The way that Karya reacts to it is incredibly realistic. You can definitely tell that Elana herself has faced this kind of pain before, which I hate for her because she is great and I love her and she is a writer bestie, but damned if it didn't produce some amazing fucking writing. Like, way to take that pain and turn it into something that can reach other people who are also struggling in that place and make them feel seen and make them feel like they aren't alone, and that the anger and pain and all that ugly, ugly part of grieving is not something that makes you a monster. Like, there's this very terrible but beautiful scene where Karya is waiting by Thorian's body, and because he's infected with the Dark Psalm, he's going to get back up again. Like, he's going to rise as a shadow beast, and in her grief, she's almost grateful because maybe he'll be himself. Maybe Nekrovar won't destroy who he was, and he'll come back, and there will be some semblance of him in there, and that'll be enough, and she clings to that, and Max is there with her, and she says, like, oh, Nekrovar's saving him. He's gonna bring Thorian back, because she's just so distraught at that point. And she almost expects Max to, like, strike her for saying that or rebuke her or do something. And all Max does is he just kind of looks at her in understanding and he says, okay, I'm going to wait here with you. And just is with her while she is obviously just going mad from grief over losing not just this last hope that these people had, but also one of the first friends that she really and truly connected with. Like, she's known Fletcher all her life, and he was her best friend before, but their friendship was also very much born out of being two people who were almost equally looked down upon by their society. There wasn't so much of, like, a positive connection between them. That has grown and developed as the book went on. Like, they do have more of a camaraderie. Same with Karya and Roxanne having more of a camaraderie by the end of Dragonspeaker. That's, really true friendship. But her connection with Thorian is just so far beyond that. That is family. And Karya's never had family before. But Thorian is basically like her brother. And they care so deeply for one another. They are part of each other. To lose that is so impactful. The way it's written is incredible at capturing that. And yeah, it is simultaneously amazing writing and also makes this my least favorite book in the series, just because I hate that Thorian dies. And like, they really keep you going on the idea that maybe they can fix this, maybe there is some way they can do this to save some part of him, and there's not. He's going to die. He's going to be a shadow beast. The best he can do is doing what Valerian did, which is very taboo and risky, and I'm not going to spoil exactly what happens there, but it's really good. And just the emotional conflict in this book as Thorian is grappling with grief and mortality and anger and depression, which honestly I think that Dark Psalm as a depression metaphor is really powerful. I don't know if it works as an exact one-to-one, but a lot of Thorian and Caria's reactions as they were dealing with this definitely reminded me of how I would lash out and snap and, just go through these periods of intense negative emotion followed by this emptiness when my depression was untreated. So yeah, there's a lot here. The 550 pages really do sail by, and I'm saying that as someone who could barely manage 300 pages without my interest kind of waning. But you might be noticing that there's only 4 roses for this book. How come? Why is that? And I promise that I did not knock a rose off because my favorite character died. I would not do that, especially when that scene in particular is handled so well. It's probably one of the most prominent and amazingly written scenes in the entire series. What does reduce this by 1 rose is the team breaking up. So, while they are looking for cures for Thorian, obviously they're running on a time limit, so they decide that the best thing to do is have some people split up and follow a couple of different leads, so that if someone finds something that works, then they can send a signal to the rest of the group and be like, okay, we got it. Rather than taking the time to go one by one through each thing. When they're in the full group of 7 people, I don't mind them splitting up because 7 people is a lot of people to write in a single scene. I know Dark Lightning was a special kind of hell. So them splitting up into 2 teams, 1 team of 4, 1 team of 3, totally fine with that. Very much able to follow 2 different groups going on their way. But then those groups split up even more, and that's where it starts to become a little bit hard to follow, a little bit hard to keep track of who's doing what and who's where. And, I'll be reading about one group, and they'll have some kind of development, and I want to keep going with it, and then we're switching to another group, and then we might be doing another group after that, and it becomes a little hard to track what's going on. Now, bear in mind that I am reading the 2019 version, not the 2020 re-release, so it's possible that since this book has come out again, Elana has addressed that and made it a little bit easier to follow, or maybe rearranged things in some way to make it a little better. So if you're still interested in the story, definitely don't take this as this is going to be unreadable or anything. I still got through it pretty quickly for me. It's just that particular difficulty did make me drop 1 rose off of this because, we start off, we've got Max, Caria, Thorian, and Seba, who I still hate. They're one group, and then we have Efrax, Roxanne, and Fletcher going in another group, and that trio is just an amazing dynamic. The personalities that they have going on there, with Fletcher being very mild-mannered and soft-spoken and kind of unnoticeable. Efrax, who is just a fucking brilliant bastard, and then Roxanne, who is definitely the muscle of the group, but very stubborn and quick to speak her mind. That group, amazing. Love them. Love their chemistry. But then they split off, so we have Efrax and Roxanne going one way to the Pheronym, which is where Efrax is from, the F words. Then we have Fletcher going off to find the elves. And yeah, okay, so now we've got 3 groups. And then with our quad over here with Max, Caria, Thorian, and Seba, Thorian eventually flies off to go do something else. So then it's just the 3 of them. They end up in the Air Estate, which is where Max is from. And then Max and Caria sneak off and leave Seba there. And Seba has a run-in with Cezanne from Dragon Speaker, who will just never leave. He just wants to get out of here so bad. He's like, I'm just a crook, you guys. Why am I being caught up in this? but we stan. He's a cool uncle. I like him and Fletcher's dynamic from Dragon Speaker. I hope they get a chance to, like, meet again, and maybe Fletcher can influence Cezanne to be a better person, and Cezanne can kind of take Fletcher under his wing. I don't know. They had a very cute, like, uncle figure dynamic relationship thing that was nice. I liked that for Fletcher. But yeah, it's really, it's a lot. There's 5 different groups. There's too many for me. I'm sorry. And let's see, what other things can I say about this book before I move on to Dragon Blood, which I'm so excited about. In this book, we do find out that Fletcher's gay, so that's something. We got some representation going on. And so we still are continuing this pattern of, like, the prologue and the epilogue having to do with Valerian, with the past, like, 1,000 years ago when he did whatever shit he did. And he just keeps getting more and more interesting. The history between Valerian, Necrovar, and Hellcrypt is really fascinating, and it really kind of gives this impression that everything that Caria and her crew are dealing with is like the direct fallout of the decisions made by Valerian and Hellcrypt, and like whatever they're going to be able to do to fix this problem is really going to come from that past, from that ancient, unresolved, unmitigated conflict that has just been kind of simmering below the surface of Solaris for the last 10 ages and is now finally rising to a head to be confronted. Like, whatever Caria does, I think it's really going to depend on her figuring out what Valerian did wrong and righting whatever mistake it was that he made due to his own fear of mortality, his not wanting to leave his loved ones behind. Like, we're finding out more and more about Valerian and how he both is and is not the hero that everyone thinks he is. Because in some ways he still is, but in a lot of other ways it's coming to light that maybe he was acting more selfishly, maybe he was not really acting with the good of the people as his first motive. What he did still led to an overall positive outcome, maybe, depending on where you stand in society, but there were better ways to handle it, you know. It's complicated, and I appreciate that, and I can't wait to continue the series into Dragon Blood, because that's when my favorite character shows up, and we will talk about that next. See you then. Dragon Blood by Elana Mugdan. Published 2020, pre-update. Genre, fantasy. 551 pages. So, like I just said, this was pre-2020 update, which means I still have the original version of this book, and as much as I will love getting the updated editions with the new covers, this is the one I'm going to regret not having this cover of being in stores anymore. Like, obviously I'm going to keep my copy, but I'm sad that no one else will get to purchase this cover with this book, because I love the cover of this book. There's so many hidden dragons. It's like a look and find. It's really fun. But that is not the most important part of this book. The reason why I bring up the 2020 update is because I don't know 100% if the only thing that was changed about this version was the cover, or if there were other edits made on the interior of the book when they went through the 2020 update, because this book came out in 2020, so it would be understandable if the only change that was made when the update happened was to the cover art. So we're kind of up in the air on that one. But regardless of whether there is an updated interior or not, Dragon Blood is my favorite book in the series so far. This is also the last part that I have actually read before. Everything following this is new territory. Books that I have not yet read. There's a novella and 2 more books in the series that I have not touched. So this is where I am leaving familiar lands and embarking onto the unknown. And I still fucking love Dragon Blood. It is still my favorite book in the series for a number of reasons that I will dive into now. So already I have found that I enjoyed these books more reading them now with a broader context of life experience than I had when I read them originally. And Dragon Blood still kicks ass. Kicks more ass. Kicks harder ass than it did before. So let's get into that because, like, okay, if I haven't sold you on this series yet from my reviews of Dragon Speaker and Dragon Child, it's worth it for this book, okay? I normally don't say stuff like that. Usually I'm more of the, if the first book of a series doesn't grab you, it doesn't matter how good it gets because that first book needs to stand on its own. I mean, I already think that Dragon Speaker and Dragon Child do stand very well on their own, but if you are still kind of on that, no, okay? You need to because you need to get to Dragon Blood, all right? That's end goals. You gotta get to Dragon Blood because Dragon Blood slaps hard. It is so fucking good. So first of all, it's just the perfect midpoint. It is such an amazing culmination of what came before it and setting up for what's going to come after that honestly this words, I'm getting so excited. This book should be taught in classes on how to write a series because it so perfectly is what a midpoint book of a series should be. It's a turning point. There are major reveals. However, there are still things that need to be wrapped up. The conflict is still looming on the horizon, and the audience, readers, whoever, is getting fucking pumped up to see what's going to come next. It delivers a lot of satisfying conclusions to early plot threads while opening up some new ones that are equally as interesting. You have to keep going. You can't stop here. You have to know what's going to happen next. And those reveals are so good and so satisfying and really just answer all of the questions that you had where you were like, I don't know if I want to wait till the end of a fifth book to figure out what's going on. Those are the answers you get in Dragon Blood. And then they raise some new questions to keep you going. It's nice. You get a little treat. You get a little treat with the promise of another treat down the road. Instead of just, kind of having the treat pulled in front of your nose the whole time. Okay, let me actually get into some specifics now. First of all, the expanded world. We get out of Elentria, we get to see some of the other countries that have been up to this point mentioned. There is more out there than just Elentria. Elentria is just one country, or rather one empire, so I guess it's a collection of countries on the same continent, but there's other stuff out there. Like as early as the first book, Cezanne is mentioning Morphane, and we actually get to see Morphane and get to see how they interact with magic, because these other countries, these other continents, have their own way of interacting with magic. It's not just the Elentrian way. The different cultures have different attitudes about magic, how it's used, what kinds of magic are used, and we get to finally explore a lot more of that with this book, because Caria has now ended up on a different continent, and the way that's handled is really good. So at the end of book 2, Dragon Child, she faces off with Nekravar, fails miserably, because failing miserably was everything that happened in Dragon Child. Just everything that could go wrong went wrong. And the blast of that, like the side effect of her losing that battle, just kind of knocks her to Gideon. I hope that's how it's pronounced. The books have a pronunciation guide, but I kind of skimmed that part, so I've been pronouncing Saba's name wrong, but I don't care. Fuck that bitch. Anyway, we're still on the fuck Saba train. Still my least favorite character, but it's okay. Anyway, so Gideon is how I'm going to pronounce this country's name, and I'm sorry if I'm getting it wrong, but not sorry enough to stop and go look it up. And there she kind of has lost her memories. Like, she doesn't really have some specifics kicking around in her brain anymore, but it's less like a, magical amnesia, and more like she is hardcore repressing a lot of shit. Like, it reads to me much more natural and organic of someone who has been traumatized and gone through a very upsetting and harrowing experience in their life
kind of burying things and trying to not deal with that grief and that loss at the moment because it is going to literally cause her to shut down. But she is still moving forward in her own way. And Carria in this book is best form of Carria that I've read so far. To be fair, haven't read past this point yet. But like, this is Carria buckling down, getting her shit together, really taking this shit seriously, like accepting what it is that she has to do and really taking responsibility for this quest. And it's not like she hasn't kind of been doing that already. Like, she's obviously wanted to protect Thorian, and that was the whole point, was that Shivnath wanted her to face Nekrovar, not Thorian. But like, I just love Carria in this book really bringing the vibes of Elana from Song of the Lioness. So if you are a Tamara Pierce fan, if you've ever read Song of the Lioness and stan Elana as you should, Carria starts giving Elana vibes. She goes to this school where they teach like sword fighting techniques. It's like a military academy, and she basically strong arms her way in because it's Carria, of course she does, and starts training as a soldier, like, you know, gaining all these sword skills. And she's really just set on like, okay, I need to master this. I need to do the work, get the training, figure out how to use this sword that I've got, because this is important. This is the only way I'm going to win. Probably no chance of her winning anyway, but she's got to try it. And this leads, first of all, even more Elana vibes. Like, the writing of her time in the academy very much reminds me of Song of the Lioness and Alana's early days as a page and squire. Just very good, very intriguing. I love it. I love the whole swordsman academy thing. That's my vibe. But what this leads to is her meeting Viren, who is my son, my good boy, my favorite. And if Carria and Viren are not the end game, I am going to fly to Elana Mugdan's home state and just stand outside her door until it is. Because, and again, the series is done by this point. I haven't read what comes next. I don't know if they end up together, but if they don't, I'm going to riot because they are so good together. Like, Viren and Carria have so much respect for each other. They communicate most of the time. There's, you know, a couple errors because they're young people, but usually they're pretty good about communicating. They are genuinely interested in the things the other person's interested in. They just work so well off of each other, and it's so much like, you know, you get this vibe with Carria and Maxton where even Carria is at this point like, did I really like Maxton, or was he just the first boy my age who gave me positive attention and I latched onto that? And now she's thinking like, okay, this thing with Viren, like, I don't know if it's romantic attraction or if we've just been through a lot of shit together. And I like that they are really stopping to like think about that. She does kiss Viren a couple of times. He does kiss back, but they don't really have a moment to stop and talk about what that means. Like, are they together now? And then Viren sees Carria with Maxton when they reunite, because I should probably mention, everyone assumes that everyone else is dead. Like, Carria was shown a vision of all her friends dying by Nekrovar, so she thinks they're all fucking dead. They saw her get swallowed by a volcano, so they think she's fucking dead. And there's this gorgeous reunion scene that is just everything. It has my whole heart. I love it. Near the end, it's just, it's so good. But Viren sees Maxton and Carria, and he's like, oh, okay, I get it, like, they're a thing. And I'm like, no, baby, no, you could kick Maxton's ass, like, get in there, fight for your girl. But Viren's got too much respect for Carria and her feelings, and he would totally stand aside if that's what she wanted. My boy. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. Anyway, yes, just tons of interesting world building, great new characters, and really a amazing step forward in this series that just does everything I wanted. I was so blown away the first time I read this. I am equally blown away now. And not to put too fine a personal point on it, but I got to beta read this book. So I also get to see a little bit of the stuff that my suggestions maybe helped a little bit on helping this book become what it is now. And that was really fun. It was my first, I think my first ever experience beta reading for another author. And had I had the time, I completely would have offered to do the other ones as well, but unfortunately I was too busy. So I adore this book. It is so good. I haven't even talked about the full reveal of what the title means, of what Carria's past is, her whole ancestry, and yeah, like a lot happens in this book. The pacing is really solid. Like, I never was bored. I think I finished reading this book in 2 days, which again, 550 pages for me to finish in 2 days. That is really fast. I literally was not putting this book down. We went to like a hotel to celebrate Ray's birthday, and I was still reading this book. Like the moment we like settled in at the hotel, I'm like, okay, I'm finishing this book now. So I was just glued to it. I loved it. I love it again. Oh, sorry, my voice. I love it again. Just, it's amazing. And like, yeah, sorry, I'm just rambling at this point, but if nothing I've said about Dragon Speaker, if nothing I've said about Dragon Child has convinced you to give this series a shot, then I hope that what I've said about Dragon Blood will do that, because this is seriously a masterwork of a series midpoint, and I think it is worthy of study. The world building is great, the character building is great, the world feels so organic and lived in. There's so many different peoples going on. And I haven't really mentioned this up to this point, but this is a very diverse cast. A lot of these characters are specifically described as having dark skin, and there are whole countries of people whose skin is dark. And again, like for fantasy, unfortunately, there is still this predominant narrative that anything with high fantasy, with like dragons and magic and stuff, has to be based on Europe and has to be Eurocentric, aka white. And that is not really the case. Even Carria, who, based on the illustrations, you would think probably is meant to be quote-unquote white, her pale skin is not treated as like a good thing or a beautiful thing. She's assumed to be like someone with albinism for a good while, because the country that she's from has mostly dark-skinned people. So they're like, yeah, this weird chick showed up one day. There are some countries that do have like a good mix of different kinds of people. But yeah, the cast is actually very diverse, and there's a lot of darker-skinned people who are a part of the main cast. They meet a lot of different people from a lot of different places, so they just keep adding more and more diversity, more and more different cultures, more and more different kinds of people with different beliefs and views. And you love to see that, especially in a YA fantasy series that is very much a high fantasy. So yes, Dragon Blood, 5 roses. Actually, I'm going to add a few more. Let's just put a couple more roses on there. There we go. Yeah, go read this series. Go read Dragon Blood. And then comment below if you also ship Carria and Viren. Maybe we can like get a poll going, because I swear to God, if they are not canon, I will do something about it. I don't even know. Let's just cross our fingers and hope. Time to move on to 18 Moons. Okay, I'm gonna start dropping the intro spiel that I've been doing for the rest of this series, because I think by now we already know who wrote the book. But anyway, I just finished reading 18 Moons, which is a novella that is in the reading order set between Dragon Blood and Dragon War, and chronologically happens during the same time as Dragon Blood. So at the end of Dragon Blood, when Carria gets back with all her friends, they tell her that a lot has been going on. Obviously, there have been updates and movements on the Elentrian continent, just as Carria has been doing stuff over in Judaon and on the ocean and making her way back to Elentria. And I'm really glad that Elana made the decision to actually write this all out, even if it is just kind of a quick summary, almost like Because, this could have easily been another 500-page novel about everything that's going on the continent. I keep saying on the continent like there's not other continents in this series, but on Elentria. Elentria is what I'm referring to. So yeah, that could have been a whole other 500-page book, but it's a novella, which means it's very quick to get through, gives you the full summary of what's been going on outside of Caria's worldview, and I really appreciate that because it really does make this world feel organic and lived in, and that there are other characters and people outside of just the main character who have their own lives and their own difficulties and things going on. And especially because during Dragon Blood, Caria spends pretty much all of it thinking that all of her friends are dead, and her friends spend pretty much all of it thinking that she's dead. So you get to see both sides of that coin, and I gotta say that 18 Moons is just make Fletcher my favorite character, the book, because Fletcher goes through so much but remains optimistic and hopeful about the odds of them winning the war, or at least holding off Necrovar from one small part of Elentria and keeping that safe. He just believes in people so much that it's really kind of infectious to the reader, and without him, I don't think that this resistance would have been able to keep going. I think that Efrex and Roxanne and Saga would have really just given into that despair, but Fletcher really came in clutch and kept everyone moving forward and organizing people just with that bright personality that he has to inspire hope in other people. And it was really cute to also see him and his boyfriend get together. I love Dannison. He kind of reminds me of Dedue from Fire Emblem a little bit. So love that, stand that. They're very cute. And yeah, short book, but definitely well worth the read. Very interesting to see some other character perspectives and find out what exactly was going on in Elentria, how some of these alliances formed that we see at the end of Dragon Blood, and just how bad of a situation Caria is walking into at the beginning of Dragon War. And I will update you once I have read that.
All right, back at it again, this time with Dragon War. This is the 4th book in the Shadow War saga, if you don't really count 18 Moons. If you do count it, it's the 5th book. And, ouchies, it hurted. It made me big sad. I guess I should probably go into plot. These are just going to become less and less coherent as I go on. But anyway, okay, so Dragon War. Caria is back. She has freed the dragons from the ether world. Things are looking up, and then they very quickly look down. It's kind of like a roller coaster. We had our high point at the end of Dragon Blood, and now everything goes to shit once again. So, sort of like how Dragon Speaker and Dragon Child are kind of like, part 1, part 2. Then you have Dragon Blood really nice in the middle, sitting on just like that peak point between them. And then I get the feeling that Dragon War and Dragon Empress are also going to be kind of like that, like half and half. They really go together kind of thing. And I'm really just excited to get to Dragon Empress, so this is probably going to be pretty short. But it hurt. It hurt me bad. So Dragon War is really just getting into the drag out battle aspect of this war. Like, they've more or less put their strategy together, they've tried and mustered their allies, and now it's actually time to do the fighting, and you really feel how exhausted the characters are and how run down they are, how, like, just far they're pushing themselves and burning out, and it's tough. Like, it's not pretty, it's not glorious or glamorous, it is sweaty, bloody, dirty, fighting all the time, always. And you really feel the desperation of the World Alliance, which is the Elentrian side, now has more allies than just the Elentrian continent, so now it's the World Alliance. And again, really interesting world building here. Some of these other nations that come in are really cool. I really like them. I really hope we get more books in this world, which I think Elana might be working on right now. And yeah, there's just a lot of different peoples and magics, and I'm very into it.
But I will definitely say this was like a hard book to get through. I think this one probably took me the longest to read out of any of them. And that just might be because it's the first full length one that I haven't read before. But it was tough. Like, I really felt bad for these characters. I really felt bad for Carria because she's taking on so much onto herself, feeling like she is responsible for all of these people. Every single death that happens in this war is her fault. And she's pushing herself to the breaking point all the time. And it's really difficult to see. And, like, technically it does have an optimistic ending because she manages to, like, push Nekrovar back and, like, seal him back in the ether world. But she's very aware that that's a temporary solution. He's gonna break out eventually. And she's now looking for a more permanent resolution where she can either, kill him or take his power away or just do something where he's not just going to come back in maybe an age or two, maybe a year or two. So it's kind of a hollow victory. Like, they fought so hard to get to this point, but even after they complete that goal, like, the world is still in shambles. I don't know why I said, like, shattered there. I'm tired, but I'm as tired as these characters apparently, but, like, it's still so shitty and it's not over yet, and everyone's, like, starting to celebrate and being like, okay, yay, like, Nekrovar is gone, and Carrie is just sitting here like, nah, that bitch ain't dead. We still gotta deal with his ass. I just bought us some time, but they're still way outnumbered and just outgunned. It's gonna be really hard, and, like, getting through this book and seeing how hard they're fighting this uphill battle was really hard. So definitely not for the faint of heart, but do I think that it had some kick-ass action scenes? Hell fucking yeah. And a lot of really good disability rep, because a lot of these characters now are dealing with, pretty much all of them are dealing with PTSD. A lot of them are dealing with chronic illness. Saga has a chronic illness that she's sort of learning to work with. And Efrex, during the 18 moons, he lost his legs. Viren is missing a hand. So, well, he was born that way, but you get a lot of really good disability rep with this series and sort of how characters react to, like, there's a variety of different characters with different kinds of disabilities or different kinds of issues that they're working through, and the POV skips around pretty frequently, which wasn't as big of an issue here as it was in Dragonchild for me. So, yeah, really excited to get to Dragon Empress. Dragon War was really tough, but it is definitely a war story, so you kind of have to be prepared for that going in, and I'm really excited to see how it all ends. Let's go. Alright, here we are, Dragon Empress, last book, and immediately I have to start with some things that I left out of Dragon War, so let me just go back over a couple of these things real quick. First of all, Kivette, fucking love her. I am partial to green dragons, and I think that she's a really interesting dragon character to include, and especially with how she reveals some things about the dragons, because one of the big things about Dragon War is that the dragons are free, but they're not fighting. And everyone's like, oh, you're just being selfish assholes. And the dragons aren't really telling them anything. They're just saying, well, we have, rules. We aren't allowed to fight. We can't. Sorry. Find someone else. And everyone's like, wow, assholes, dicks. The elders are dicks. And Kivette gives some insight a little bit into why that is. Like, not directly to the human characters, because she's not allowed to say, but through her point of view, you get, like, a sense that something's going on that is making them not allowed to fight. And then, of course, you have the bits of the epilogue and the prologue with Nekrovar / Helcryft and Shivnith that explains more about why that is. So anyway, Kivette, love her. Love that Fletcher has a fucking dragon. Fuck yes. If any character from the friend group was gonna get a fucking dragon, Fletcher's the one that I want. Like, Fletcher seems so unassuming. He's not very powerful as a wielder, and you just wouldn't expect him to be the one who's paired up with this super powerful being, but just through the goodness of his own heart, he is the one who's bonded with Kivette at the end of the book, and I'm like, yes, fuck yes. That's my son, that's my boy, give him a dragon. Like, he is the best person to be teaching Kivette how to feel feelings. And I sense that there's going to be some angst, because there's always some angst with these bonded pairs, but I'm here for it. Yes, good, Fletcher. Also, Max, what a little fucking bitch. Fuck you, Max. That bitch ain't dead. I know that bitch ain't dead. And then I read Dragon Empress, and I was fucking right. That bitch ain't dead. In fact, he's a bigger bitch than we ever thought. And when I call Max a bitch, we have to go back to Saga. Do I like Saga now? Is Sabaris valid? And to that I say, kind of. Alright, hear me out. I do not take back what I said about Saga in, like, books 1 and 2. She was a huge bitch to Carria for no goddamn reason, at least none that Carria would understand. It really just came off as her being, like, prejudiced against lower class people, and she was just a huge fucking bitch, and very self-centered and, you know, all that, and just very jealous about Max. In Dragon War and Dragon Empress, I think that she, like many of the characters, really grew from her experiences. Not always in, like, a really positive way. Like, it wasn't like, oh, you know, you went through so much, but it's good because you had this growth. Like, no, I'm sure she would have been happy without ever having to have that growth. But she did have it. She did gain more empathy for other people and kind of got this sort of, like, begrudging, okay, like, I don't like Carria still, we are just two people who probably wouldn't get along in any other circumstance, but I can at least respect her, I can understand the position that she's in, and support her, even if she's, like, not someone that I would probably be friends with any other way. And I really feel like that turning point of her character was really well done. It was very subtle. Like, there's no moment where now Carria and Saga are, like, buddy-buddy, teasing each other and stuff the way that Carria becomes with Roxanne. And Roxanne continues to be a fucking badass, and I love her, and I love, in this book, Dragon Empress, what we're talking about now. Just to be clear, we're now on Dragon Empress. But Roxanne has that moment with fucking Leech, and I'm like, that is the coolest shit. He was so obsessed with trying to destroy Carria because he thought that she was the female sorceress from the prophecy that was going to destroy him, and it was Roxanne the whole time. And I'm like, yes! I love Roxanne's connection with the animals. I love how hard she fights for the animals, especially because usually in series that have sentient animal characters, they do tend to get pushed to the side. They do have their own needs pretty much ignored. They're usually just there for service to the human characters. So this series really addresses that and calls that out, and then you have Roxanne stepping in to be the animal's voice with the human government and say, hey, by the way, you can't just fuck with the animals, okay? They're living beings and you need to respect that. And I fucking love her. Like, her and Fletcher are probably, well, her, Fletcher, and Viren are probably my favorite of, like, the group. They are just really solid characters with very different personalities and skill sets that work so well together to support Carria, and it's great. Saga, I still wouldn't say is one of my favorites, but I do think that I tolerate her a lot more in the last two books. I'm not, like, rolling my eyes whenever her chapters come up anymore. And part of that is because, wow, Max really did her dirty, huh? Like, okay, Max being revealed as a traitor after 18 Moons, especially after Dragon War, not surprised. Like, yeah, that tracks. Like, the king was already on Necrovar's side. It's not that much of a stretch to think that Max secretly was too. And die. Like, Max deserves to die, and am kind of upset a little bit that Saga died. Like, you know, by the end of it, I was hoping she would make it through, especially because she finally found this other family with the Nereids, and it seemed like she was really starting to come into her own as a queen and making decisions that she felt were right instead of just thinking like what her dad would do. But like, if anyone out of the main group was going to die, I guess Seba's the one that I would be the least upset about. But the way she went out, I thought was pretty good. Like, she really, she had a blaze of glory moment that she got to go out on. She didn't succumb to her illness or something like that. And I'm really glad that she did find that strength and found like that self-respect and self-reliance. And yeah, like, I would have preferred it if she got to live, but this is war, people die. And yeah, this was probably the one character, like, if Fletcher or Roxanne or Efrex or Viren had died, I would have been fucking on the floor crying my eyes out. Seba I didn't really like as much, so I'm more like, okay. Like, it would have been nice if she lived, but she's an acceptable loss for me because I didn't like her that much. Efrax and Roxanne, since I've brought up his name, haven't really talked all that much about Efrax in this review series. He's there. He's a good character as well. He's got a lot of interesting things going on. What I found really interesting was the fact that they do not get together at the end of the series. And they actually do have a conversation about it that I really appreciated them having, where they chat, they have that moment to talk about their feelings, and they're like, yeah, I do love you, but... And Roxanne's the one who says, I think we're better as friends. I don't think we should be in a relationship, because they tried that previously, and it didn't work out. And they're like, okay, we're friends. And that's really nice. I like seeing a male and a female character who have been through a lot together, who definitely have a strong chemistry together on the page, who were romantically involved, who did have, or maybe still do have feelings for each other, just acknowledging that a relationship is not the best thing for them and that they can just be friends. That's really great. I love to see that. And speaking of relationships, I fucking won. Kieran, is that... I don't know what the ship name is. Karia and Viren. I personally like Viria as a ship name, but, I don't remember what the official ship name is. But they got together. They did it. And it was hard to get there because Viren kept being like, oh man, like, I can't. She's so amazing and she has to make all these sacrifices. And there was a lot of will they, won't they. And in the end, they do, and I'm so happy about it. And yes, good. This is what I wanted for they. They have just a very good, supportive, loving relationship throughout, aside from, like, the one or two moments of misunderstanding where they're trying to do the right thing for each other and just not communicating very well. But other than that, they're very supportive and loving and cute. And yes, I got what I wanted. I'm very happy about that. I don't have to riot. Gotta cancel my plane ticket. So, good. It was good. Now to actually talk about the ending. Like, what actually happens at the end of all of this. And I'm not gonna spoil. Like, I know I've spoiled a lot throughout this video. I'm not gonna spoil the exact ending of this series because I definitely do want people to read it. And a lot of the spoilers I've given away so far, I feel, are like context to get to this point, but I'm not going to spoil the final ending. What I am going to say about that final ending is that, was it a total surprise? Honestly, no. Was it satisfying? Very much so, yes. I feel like if you're paying attention, you can see where this is going and you can kind of predict where this story is going to end up. But that is not a bad thing. That is just the author laying down the clues for you to pick up on, and if you happen to pick up on them before the characters do, that's great. But like, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. There is a clear progression of ideas, and if you're following that and you're paying attention, you'll probably guess the ending by the end of Dragon War, and then Dragon Empress is just a lot of, getting to that. But I think it was really satisfying. I think it had a really good message. And I think it does the most important thing that the last book in a series can do, which is it made me want to go back and reread those series again, now with the context of what I know about certain characters, and see all the hints that were laid out beforehand that I didn't pick up on before because I didn't know they were hints. But, as I believe I said earlier, like, as early as Dragon Speaker, there are a lot of clues about things that are revealed in Dragon Blood, and a lot of those continue to develop and move forward, and it's really fucking interesting to watch that happen. So I really want to kind of go back to those early books now that I know how it ends, and see if I can pick up on some of those hints that I didn't before. And yeah, like I said, I think that is one of the most important things a final book in a series like this can do, to make you want to reread the books again, re-experience this adventure again, even if it was painful, even if parts of it were difficult to get through. A lot of Karia's POVs now I'm going back to talking about the last two books together again. Like I said, they really do they're a set. But a lot of Karia's POVs are kind of difficult to get through. Just as someone with depression, as someone with self-esteem issues, I really relate to a lot of her thought process and what she's going through, and that does make it kind of hard to read sometimes, because she is very down on herself. She is very much putting herself on the hook for every bad thing that happens in the entire series. Like I said with the Dragon War review, every single death, she blames herself for it. And she really does not forgive herself for her mistakes. And to a point where it kind of feels like this is a lesson that she's learned, but there's a difference between knowing something and doing something. So she might know in her mind that these things are not her fault and that she can't keep beating herself up about it. But actually acting on that and changing your mindset is a lot easier said than done. And yeah, so some of her chapters are a little hard to parse through, especially in Dragon War, because she's just so tired, and you really feel it with the descriptions and how just sluggish she starts to get. So yeah, at the end of all things, to wrap up this review set, the Shadow War Saga is an incredible young adult fantasy series. I think that it is probably... I know this is about to be a big fucking statement, but I stand by it. In terms of, like, fantasy war stories, I feel like this is a solid alternative to Lord of the Rings. Like, if Lord of the Rings is something you have a hard time getting through, if high fantasy like Lord of the Rings isn't your thing, or just the way it's written doesn't appeal to you, if the books are just too big, like, whatever it is. If you can't read Lord of the Rings, or you've already read it and you want something else that's similar but has a little bit more diversity, a little bit more modern ideas, Shadow War Saga. Like, I am not even joking. Shadow War Saga, in my opinion, is every bit the heart and the skill that was possessed by Lord of the Rings. And I don't make that statement lightly as someone who is reading Lord of the Rings alongside it. And the two of them very much being war stories. Lord of the Rings is about war and the damages that it brings to the people and the land, and so is Shadow War Saga. Shadow War Saga does not shy away from, the suffering that the peasants are going through. They even bring it up. Like, at one point in Dragon War, Efrex visits a village in the Firanem, and they're like, oh yeah, some of the people there are like, yeah, we know that, the Elentrian forces are probably going to try to reclaim something, and, we know we're going to die in that conflict. There's going to be people caught in the crossfire, and when armies fight, it's the innocent civilians that die. And Efrex then approaches the rest of the people in Caria, and he's like, hey, is there any way we can minimize these casualties? Because they have a point. Why are we even fighting in this war and trying to rebel against Necrovar if we're going to end up killing just as many people? So it's interesting, and it really goes a lot of places with things like depression, anxiety, trauma. It's an excellent read. It's an excellent series. And Elana, if you're watching this incoherent mess, I want you to know how proud I am of you for finishing this series. That is an amazing accomplishment to have written 5 novels and a novella, to wrap things all up, to have it be such a journey from start to finish with these characters, knowing that it was such a journey for you, that you started this at a very young age and just progressively got better and better at your craft when you were writing this. I can't wait to see what you do next, and I am so happy that I got to be part of this series along with you. And I think that is going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for sticking with me if you're still here. I will link to Elana's official site below where you can purchase the Shadow War Saga. I will also put her Ko-fi page where, if you don't want to necessarily buy these books, but you do want to support an amazing indie author and her adorable pet snake Medusa, you can always just give a tip on Ko-fi. And I believe she also sells her books on Ko-fi. So if you don't want to buy from Amazon or something like that, you can buy the books there. That is where I bought Dragon Empress. And you can also get them signed and personalized over there. So those links will be in the description, as well as my links to my website, my social medias, my Patreon, and my Ko-fi, where you can now do a pay what you want for my ebooks. So my ebooks are up on my Ko-fi for a minimum of $1, but it's just kind of a pay what you want thing. So if you are interested in supporting me, but you don't want to commit to a monthly donation on Patreon, that would be a great way to support me, support the channel, and support my writing without having to commit to monthly donations. Thank you so much, and keep reading till next time, Rose Garden.